Goliath Cleric says, what is the point that you look at an encounter and think to yourself, this is too deadly. I can't run this encounter. I want to remind folks that my Kickstarter, Into the Fey, is currently available for pre-order. It is a 5th edition compatible adventure module designed to take a party from level 1 to level 5. So if you're looking to start a new campaign soon, or a new dungeon master looking for a user-friendly module, Into the Fey might be just the thing for you. It features lots of new Fey creatures, new magic items, interesting and dynamic NPCs, and I might add, the adventures are not all just hack and slash, go in and kill everything. I mean, the adventure module is themed around the Fae, and Fae creatures do love their tricks. There's a link below if you want to pre-order. Fulfillment does begin this summer, and we're also looking to be locking down the orders fairly soon so we can get final numbers over to our manufacturers. So if you want in on the action, pre-order soon. What is the point that you look at an encounter and think to yourself, this is too deadly. I can't run this encounter. There is no such point. The only question is, at what point do I need to warn my players first? That's really the only question. I will put any encounter in the game, no matter how deadly it is. The real question is, do my players need a warning first? Do they need clues that this is something they shouldn't trifle with? Or is it something they might survive and they're not getting any clues? Because if they might survive it, then you're not getting any clues. But if it's something so overwhelmingly powerful that they are going to die and there's nothing they can do about it, theoretically, then I'm gonna give them little tiny warnings and hints that they should probably run away or use social interaction skills to bypass this encounter. That's really the only question, in my opinion. Luke has yet to find that threshold. I don't know. My Ancient Dragon group ran into an encounter that was very, very powerful, and they beat it just barely, and one of them died. Goliath Cleric says, Ancient Dragon plus Abishai versus level 8 PCs. It wasn't an Ancient Dragon, it was only an Adult Dragon. Versus level 8 PCs didn't require a warning that I noticed, unless it was just really good RP. Goliath Cleric, are you seriously telling me that a massive dragon and 2 Abishai aren't warning enough? That's not warning enough. If that's not warning enough, then yeah, I don't know how to give warnings, I guess. It's like, hello, I'm a massive dragon. I will melt your face off. And by the way, I have friends. Like, the dungeon master has to be like, to make it obvious. My players are far too afraid of everything. I have an encounter they're able to finish. They find a magic axe. They ask the guard if they can get help and get a temporary magic sword. And they are still too afraid to go in. At some point, they pressured themselves in, but still forgot the I had my youngling players were like this. My youngling players were literally like this. They were afraid to go anywhere. They were afraid to open doors. They were afraid to go into dungeons. When we first started playing, they were afraid to do those things because they were afraid of dying all the time. I literally sat them down. That's its expression. I literally sat them down and I explained to them, listen, you guys, listen. The game is designed for you to win. It's designed for you to be able to win. You will win 95% of the time. And 5% of the time, somebody will probably die. And then you're going to be able to go raise them from the dead, almost assuredly. This game is balanced. The adventures are balanced for you to win. Because this game is a heroic fantasy game. Heroic fantasy games, the heroes usually win. They almost always win. That is how the game is designed. Or at least I should say that's how I run the game. Different dungeon masters will do a different thing. but in the game you're playing, it's designed for you to be able to win. So you don't need to be afraid of every little thing. It's okay. You're gonna win most of the time. As long as you don't do anything stupid, as long as you use your brains, as long as you don't, you know, just totally just be like, ah, let's fight an ancient dragon with 2 Abishai, whee! As long as you don't do stuff like that, then you're probably gonna be okay. So use your brains, you know, use your ingenuity, be cautious when it's needed. But if you play intelligently and don't just totally do moronic stuff, the game is designed to be winnable. So having that conversation is okay with a group that is totally timid and afraid to do everything. And I feel like once they understand that, that's probably going to reassure them a little bit. Now, will it take a little bit of the drama and the tension out of the game? Will it deplete that a little bit? Yeah, it probably will. You know, will that kind of maybe ruin the game experience a little bit? Maybe. But if you're at the point where they're afraid to do everything, it's probably time for that conversation. So that's probably what I would do. How do I handle dumb player characters? Low intelligence as a DM. When there are several of them in a party acting in character, preventing any progress by making stupid decisions. Talk to your players. Explain the issue with them and ask them to help you. That's what you do. That's what you do. Your players are responsible for role-playing their characters. If the manner in which they're role-playing their characters is negatively affecting the game, then it's time to talk to them. And that is blanket advice for any situation. In this case, they're role-playing their characters like morons, and that's impeding the progression of the game. It's negatively affecting the game, at least from your point of view. Who knows what their point of view is, but at least from your point of view, it's negatively affecting the game. So, time to talk to them. Anytime they're doing something that's negatively impacting the game, it's time to talk to your players. This is blanket advice that can apply in pretty much any situation at all. And it would definitely apply in that one. You speak with them, you explain what the problem is, you explain why it's a problem, the impact that it's having, and then you ask them, hey, guys, how can we do this? What can we do? You don't have to push a solution on them. You don't have to dictate what they do. You don't have to tell them, stop doing this, start doing this. Don't do any of that. They won't own the solution. You want them to own the solution. You want them to help you solve the issue. You're not going to tell them what to do. You're not going to take their agency away. You're not going to give them commands. You explain what the situation is. You explain what you're running into, and then you ask them, guys, what can we do? Because I feel like this is negatively impacting the game. And then they can be partners with you in deciding what the solution is going to be. And when they are involved in the solutioning process, they're going to own it more, and they're going to be more committed to following through with it. So this is like leadership 101, right? Let them own the decision, let them be part of it. Therefore, they have more desire to actually do it, as opposed to if you just told them something. It's the same reason that when something is overpowered in the game, and I think a nerf is in order, I don't just tell the player what's going to happen. I usually will ask the player, I will explain to the player, this thing is overpowered, this is the problem it's causing. What do you think we should do? And the player will propose some ideas to me. Usually, one of those ideas is good enough, and I'll pick that. And then the player will feel like he was involved in the process, and he will feel much better about that nerf than if I had just told him this is what we're doing. So you always want to try to involve the player in decisions like that. In general, for most things, it's always a good thing to do. Things will turn out better that way. My Curse of Straud players are ignoring Straud's invitation. How do you think Straud would react? What would he do? My Curse of Straud players ignored Straud's invitation. Straud does not get ignored in his world. He does not get ignored. Straud paid my players a visit of his own. He arrived in his own coach, escorted by a bunch of vampires. He arrived in power. He opened up a magical portal and he says, get through there. You're going to Castle Ravenloft to dine with me. He does not take no for an answer. He did not give them a choice. They refused him once, and then he said, get through there now. And then when they went to Castle Ravenloft to dine with him, they had a conversation, and to taunt them, there was lots of things that were said, but one of the things that he did to show them that he was in control, that he had absolute power, and that the players could do nothing, he brought out Gertrude. Gertrude is Mad Mary's daughter, who Straud had abducted and now has in Castle Ravenloft. So he brought out Gertrude. Maybe it might be Gertruda, but anyway, he brought out Gertrude, and he literally bit her neck and drank her blood in front of my players. And they knew that she was an innocent that was having her blood drank in front of them. And he did it to taunt them, but he also did it to show them that I am in control here. You are powerless and you will do nothing, will you? And my players, they were like level 3 or 4 at this point. They did nothing. They sat there and they watched Straud drink her blood. One of the players stole one of Straud's chairs. That was his passive aggressive response. It's like, okay, maybe we can't stop you from drinking her blood, but I'm taking your chair. So that is what I had Straud do. And the next time Straud wanted to talk to them, they were traveling along and the fog closed in upon them. And then no matter which way they went, there was Straud in a tent waiting to dine with them. And then he had another conversation with them. And again, flaunted his power, ignored their petty threats, laughed them away, saying that, oh, you have backbone, you have gumption. And then he gave them boons. He gave them magical boons because they were doing things in the game world that were helping him, helping his end goals, and they didn't even know it. So those are some of the encounters my players have had with Straud. He does not take no. Nobody tells Straud no. And if you do, he shows you who's boss. Where did they put the chair? They put the chair like in the middle of the street. Just left it in the street. It was Meridon. He took the chair and he left it in the street. You create a field of silvery light that surrounds a creature of your choice within range. You can choose yourself. The field the field sheds dim light out of fire. You know why they have to include that parenthetically? Do you know why they have to parenthetically include you can choose yourself? Okay? Because Jeremy Crawford gets thousands of tweets of spells that don't include that, and the tweets are basically like, hey, it says that you can choose a creature within 10 feet of yourself, or 60 feet of yourself. Can I choose myself? And then he's like, you are a creature and you are within 60 feet of yourself. At least I hope you are. And that's it. And then the person's like, oh, I'm a creature and I'm within 60 feet of myself. Oh, I must be able to cast it on myself. Oh. And so that's why they have to include that parenthetically, because he got so many tweets. He was finally just like, okay, that's it. We're putting this in every single one of the spells from now on. I guarantee you that's why that's in there. He was tired of all the tweets aimed at him. And he was tired of giving snarky responses. So he was like, okay, fine, we'll put it in the rules. I just want to ask how you handle players who want to craft stuff like magic weapons. I don't really do that a whole lot at all. My table dislikes the official rules because you need a year of downtime. Yes, because it's powerful. To be able to make your own magic weapons, it should take time. I would use, listen, there are rules in Xanathar's, I'm pretty sure there are, for downtime in crafting your own magic weapons. I would just follow those rules. If my players don't like the rules, sorry. But I'm not gonna make this easy for you. Players always want more power. Most players always want more power. It's all empty. You can see that. There's the coffee cam. Did anybody warn me? One short rest equals one legendary magic item. Oh man, you're gonna give me, I'm gonna freak out over here. Medium. Group not play for almost 2 months due to being busy. That's the spiral of death. I kind of can't remember what we were doing, and I don't know if I'm even that interested in the campaign anymore. What do I do? I like the players, but I don't think I'm invested in the specific story anymore. Baby DM's first campaign versus Unplanned and Chaotic. Okay. There needs to be a balance between continuity of the game that you're running and like running something that you're interested in. Because here are the extremes. So there are two extremes. The one extreme is I am miserable in this campaign, but I committed to it and I am running this campaign. We are doing this campaign. My players don't like the campaign, but we said we were gonna run it and we are gonna run this campaign. We're gonna finish it because yes, that's this extreme. Here's the other extreme. You know, we started the campaign like a week ago, but I'm kind of losing interest already. And I don't want to run a campaign that I'm not interested in. So let's change the other let's make a new campaign. And then like, you know, a few weeks later, a couple of the players are like, you know, we kind of don't like the campaign anymore. Could we do something different? You know, it's getting a little bit old, you know. So those are the two extremes. There's we're running it and we're never changing no matter how much we hate it. And then there's I'm losing interest, I want to change, and then you're constantly changing what you're doing because you won't stick to any one thing. That is reprehensible, and the other extreme is probably equally reprehensible. So you don't want to be either of those things, okay? Either extreme is bad. Somewhere in the middle somewhere is where you want to be. You want to have some commitment to the campaign that you're running because you can't just be swapping it and changing it every 5 seconds. Your players will murderize you at the very least. But you also don't want to just be miserable running a campaign you hate either. So I don't know where you lie on that spectrum. If you guys haven't played for almost a couple months, maybe it's a good time for a reboot. You could do that. I would also, you didn't really ask about this, but I would also consider finding people who aren't as busy. I don't know if it was you who were too busy to run the game or if it's your players who are too busy, but you might consider trying to find folks who are actually available to run the game. Because the unfortunate truth is that if a person is too busy to play the game, he is too busy to be one of your players. What are you going to do? You know, so you might also consider trying to find people who are more available to actually play the game. But you know, you can reboot at your discretion. Just keep in mind the two extremes and being careful not to fall into either one of them because both are bad. How to encourage players to roleplay as their chosen race or class without taking away their agency. Spellcasters roleplay as a martial class and never use spells. I mean, there are two responses. There's Luke's response, which is, I don't care. It's not my character. It's their character. If they want to roll up a wizard and then they want to rush into the front lines and try to fight with their dagger or something, that's not my business. That's what they want to do. They will find out very quickly that is a bad idea because my monsters will hack them up into little pieces. That's how I would respond to that. I'd be like, you can do what you want with your character. I don't care. You know, that's your business. You want to have your wizard going to the front lines? Okay. Hack. Okay, now you need to make a new wizard because the wizards aren't designed to go into the front lines. Oh. Yeah, you know, by the way, if you want to play a character that goes into the front lines, might I suggest a paladin or a fighter or a barbarian? Those were all very strong, solid choices. Ah, okay. So I'm probably not even going to say anything unless, here's the caveat, unless it's causing a problem in the game for the other players. Because I have had situations where we had mostly a balanced party. We had a rogue, a wizard, a barbarian, or a fighter or something. There were 4 players. There was like a frontline type. There was a fighter. There was an archer. And there were 2 rogues. So it was mostly balanced. As long as the fighter did what fighters would do and go into the front lines. But the problem in this game was the fighter was afraid of everything and she never wanted to go first. She had a 19 armor class, really good damage output. She was a good fighter, good solid build, and she never wanted to go first. And it was causing a legitimate problem because the other players, the archer was always going first and getting walloped on. And the two rogues, they were scouting sometimes ahead, but they didn't want to go first into a fight or something. And so the other players were getting walloped on. So in that situation, because that player's choices were affecting the other players and decreasing the enjoyability of their game experience, because of that and that alone, I spoke to that player, and she was also a younger player and hadn't played a whole lot before. So in that case, I explained to her, hey, listen, you know, you're a fighter, you have high armor class, it's hard to hurt you, and you have lots of hit points. If you go first and the enemies attack you, it's gonna protect the rest of your party, and they're gonna be able to help you kill things faster. So in that case, I made an exception, primarily for two reasons. One, it was negatively affecting the rest of the group, and two, she was a younger player, and I wanted to explain things to her. Now, if you have an adult that comes into my group, you know, they're not gonna get the benefit of, oh, I'm gonna explain it to you because you're a younger player or something. If they're a new player, I might give them a lowdown of it. But at the end of the day, if they've had the explanation from me or some others and they understand it, and they still choose to go do that thing that's not very good idea for their character to do, I'm not going to tell them not to. It's their choice. It's their character. They can do what they want. My monsters will still treat you the same way. If the wizard or the bard runs in front, my monsters don't care what your character sheet says. They will kill you regardless. So there's a couple different ways I've handled it before. It really depends on the situation. It depends on how it's affecting the group. It depends on the individual player. Sometimes I'll talk to them. Sometimes, you know, other times it'll just be like, okay, whatever you want to do, wee. But it really depends. You can always talk to them and have a conversation with them. There's probably never going to be any harm with having a conversation with them. But after that happens, it's up to them and they got to do their thing. If that means running in front when they shouldn't and getting slashed up, well, that's what it means. How do you run an adventure for a group that doesn't really like combat? Find a game that isn't D&D. D&D is a combat game. It is at its core a war game. It is what it's based on. 90% of the rules are around combat. So if your group doesn't like combat, may I suggest Dungeons and Dragons might not be the correct game system for you. If you don't want combat, there are lots of other game systems, which I don't really play because I love combat, but there are lots of other game systems that are probably better for your group. Dungeons and Dragons is not an end-all be-all. It doesn't accommodate, it can accommodate that play type, but it is probably not the most optimal. There are probably better systems out there for your group. So my first suggestion to you is find a different game system, because you're probably gonna find a game system that makes non-combat stuff more enjoyable and better than Dungeons and Dragons does, because Dungeons and Dragons at its core is a combat game. It is. Look at the rules. 90% of the rules are about combat. 90% of the character sheet is about combat. There's an entire rule book, the monster manual, that has combat stats. So the first suggestion is to find a different game, more than likely. And if they don't like combat in their adventures, then you simply create adventures that don't have combat. I don't know how else to put it. Like, I don't have any mind-blowing advice here. If your group doesn't like combat, create adventures that don't have combat. So it's going to be social situations, social interactions. It's going to be exploration. You're just not going to have that element of combat. Or combat doesn't happen very often. You just, if your group doesn't like combat, you just don't put combat into your games. Now, if you like combat, then you have a problem. Because I love combat. I love combat. Hardcore, if I had a group of players that did not want to do any combat at all, I don't think I could run a game for them. I would be at an impasse. I would probably be like, you know, guys, this is not a good fit. I am the wrong dungeon master for you. I love combat, and I probably am not going to be able to run a game without combat. So there are 5 of you. I suggest that one of you becomes the dungeon master and you guys run a game without combat. I'm gonna go find other players who like combat because that's the game I want to run. Like I can't saddle myself up in a game that I'm gonna be miserable running. You know, it's not a good fit for me, and it's not a good fit for them. If I'm not having fun doing it, I'm not gonna do a good job at it, and they're probably not gonna enjoy themselves. So it's bad for them, it's bad for me. So I would look for different players if my players were like that. So part of the question here is, what do you like? You know, is this a good fit for you? Do you want to run that game for them? Because if you don't, then you gotta think about that. So there's another thing to think about too in that scenario.